Good evening, my fathers, mothers, brothers, and sisters. I greet you all in the wonderful name of our Lord Jesus Christ. We are here this evening for our weekly Bible study. I just want to welcome all of you from wherever you are. This is a platform that we have created for ourselves to come together at this time every week on Wednesday to study the Word, which is one of those who were ordained, is one of the vows that we make to pray and study the Word. So you are all welcome. We are happy that we are here together. I always say the good thing about the Bible study is that we don't listen to one person speaking. We are able to ask questions. We are able to engage. We are able to bring our own interpretation of scriptures. So this month of September, we were dealing with topics, different topics that from the experiences that we have as Christians, the issues that we deal with in our every meetings, sometimes in our lives as we continue the journey of serving God. Today we are humbled by the presence of one of my friends who is also a colleague, a minister of the Methodist Church in Southern Africa, Reverend Jacob Mukutso, who is seconded to the University of Free State. So he is a lecturer at the University of Free State. We are really blessed to have him as a friend, a family friend, as a colleague, and one of us in the Christian fraternity. So we are going to ask him to lead us in the topic that was sent to us: funerals and costs. Before we do that, I would like to request Moruti Magagane to lead us in prayer. Mkoni, can you lead us in prayer, please?
Masithandaze, let's pray. Morena le modimo wa rena, papa ka lebaka la morena Jesu. Wena modimo mo ba gona, mokgwetšwa le gona, modimo wa tlileng go ba gona. Le bošegong bjo kgoši dikgoši, re phagamiša matsogo a re motsebo wa swana le wena. Ge sa le modimo wa go se balwe le mengwaga, wena motala wa mabaka.
Yes.
Re etapela sefatlhego sa gago kgoši, re tlile go ithuta lentswe la gago Modimo, ka gore lentswe la gago ke bophelo. Re kwele Modimo wa rena gore mantšu ka moka a bophelo a hwetšagala go wena. Ke ka baka le Modimo wa rena re kgopelang maatla a go kgomarela go wena, re re bjalo ka Petros ge re tloga go wena re tla leba kae Morena. Re rapelela mohlanko wa gago Modimo wa rena ba sa tšwa gore tsebiša yena moruti Mkhutšo wa tlileng go abelana le rena Modimo ka lentswe la gago. Kgoši ya dikgoši ka leina la Jesu Kriste wa Nazareta, motlatše ka moya o mokgethwa, a ebe wena ka sebele o re rutang, re rutwe ke wena kgoši, gore le mohlang Modimo wa rena re tlileng go boya re fa report ka bophelo bja rena lefaseng le letšatši le Modimo le seke la re fetogela lefela. Re go tshepile senata, re atse re ba go tshepile ngao ba swabiše, re direle tšohle le ka godimo ga go kgopela ga rena ka leina la Jesu Kriste wa Nazareta. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mkoni. Thank you for a wonderful prayer. Zumba, the platform is yours. We welcome you. We give you this platform to address us. Thank you.
Thank you, Nzomba.
Yes.
Can you allow me to share my screen, Nzomba?
Okay, fine. Nomzi, can you do that on your side?
It's done. Thank you.
It's done. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Nzomba, and greetings to everyone. And thank you very much for this opportunity to share some thoughts on this. I'm hoping that you are able to hear me clearly.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, we didn't communicate with what language to speak, but I've prepared to
English, preferable
okay.
English, yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Fundisi, for this platform and also for this opportunity to share. I was just a bit scared when you said this is a Bible study. In my presentation, unfortunately, I don't have even a single scripture reference.
Okay.
I just
no problem.
Yes, I just looked at the topic generally, and I've also rephrased it to funerals and their costs in Black African communities,
Yes.
because not all communities experience the same things as we do. Hence,
Yes.
I have rephrased it. I have outlined my presentation in this manner just to have a bit of an introduction and also to look at few sources as an introduction to this conversation around the cost of funerals in Black African communities. And we'll look at the cause, and for the cause, I'm going to reflect a bit on African religion as well as Christian religion, African cosmology, and the meaning and the importance of African bereavement rituals, and interpretation and some recommendations. The first part is that it is a fact that our Black African funerals are very expensive compared to other racial groupings, especially when we look at the white communities. And there is a reason behind this, and we'll get to it at the later stage. The church and other sectors in society have tried to address this, and I'm hoping today's thoughts that I will bring will also assist in this conversation regarding the expenses of funerals. And I must say that this is not only something that perhaps has come in the Presbyterian Church, even the Methodist Church. We have had a conversation over and over with our people regarding how excessive and how expensive their funerals are. And it is a conversation that we had, and I don't think there has been a progress in that regard. So this is something that many communities are really grappling with. I wanted to share some few things. There's a research that I will forward to you. It's written by Jimmy Roth, titled Informal Microfinance Schemes, the Case of Funeral Insurance in South Africa.
Okay.
Jimmy Roth did a research around the microfinance schemes in Black townships. And his research area was in Grahamstown. And he came across a number of findings that I want to introduce, that it is true that our Black African funerals are very, very expensive. And there are a number of things that he came across. And one of them is that the church is also part of the expense. And it is part of the expense in a sense that in Black African funerals, when there's a funeral, a practice is during the week, there would be weekly prayers where the church would go to comfort the bereaved family. And that is an expense on its own, because he mentions a few things. That during those prayer meetings, a household provides refreshments and to 20 to 70 people. And in some instances, a family is supposed to hire a tent in order to accommodate this prayer and also facilitate this number of people who come every day for this prayer. So it's not only the church that would be part of those services, but other people like your colleagues, neighbors, members of the community would also join in such prayer. So that is the first expense that he had noted in his research. Secondly, after a funeral, relatives have to be contacted. And that is also an expense that the bereaved incur. A few days before the funeral, relatives arrive from all over the country for the funeral. And that means sleeping over and also feeding those relatives who have come to attend. The fourth point is also on the day of the bereavement of the funeral, where people would come to support the family and bury the person who has passed away. And it's not only that, but there are many things that are involved there financially that the family has to carry. The fifth point is also at some stage a hall has to be rented because of a number of people who would come. And at least at this stage, we have really taken a break on that because of COVID regulations. The sixth one, which is something that is happening in townships, is after tears, which often is the family that has to carry the costs of those after tears. And thereafter, depending on a culture or that particular family. After a while, the family would also have to gather to do some rituals in which a goat or other things would be bought and meal prepared so that those rituals are performed. And in his findings, the reasons he found for these expenses, one is the expenses related to funerals are related to the belief of the ancestors, that if certain things are not done correctly, the family may have some challenges. Secondly, he found that some of the participants he interviewed were saying, and I quote, "We are poor in life. Let's not be poor in death." So we were poor in life. So why not make a funeral a good one instead of a poor one? The third point is the issue of consumption. The issue of consumption, that it is somehow cultural in a sense, and I will also note that later, that we believe as Africans that when we have visitors, we must feed them, and we must feed them the best that we can. And the last point that he noted is funerals are opportunities to put one's Sunday best and meet friends from distant places that one has not seen for a long time. So because of our setup in South Africa, during a funeral, you'd find that relatives come from all over the place, and even in other African countries. So to some, that is a challenge, that because I'm going to be meeting people that I've not met in a while, many people, I need to also look my best and do my best. And that's where the issue of being excessive comes in. Going forward, I think one of the challenges is, I think the mainline churches have not given themselves enough time to understand African dynamics. And I will elaborate as I go further. Secondly, Black Africans, knowingly or unknowingly, have fused together African traditional religion and Christianity. And fusing the two together comes with its own challenges and conflicts. And I will also unpack that as we go along. And for me to elaborate this point, I want to start off by looking at African cosmology, which I think will assist us in understanding some of these expenses that we have observed in church and also in our Black African funerals. So when we talk cosmology, we talk about an understanding or a study that seeks to understand the world, or how the world came to be. And there are different cosmologies. Christianity has a particular understanding of how the world came to be. The Muslims, I think, and other religions and African traditional religion also have their view of how the world came to be. And that informs so many things about our faith, about how we understand ourselves as a people or as a religion. So when we talk African cosmology, this simply means the way Africans perceive or conceive and contemplate their universe. And this refers to the lens through which they see reality. And I think we need to note that one. This refers to a lens through which they see reality, which affects their value systems and their attitudinal orientations. And it is the African search for the meaning of life. So what is this African worldview? And Bujo helps us a bit to understand this worldview. When he says, in the African worldview, God and the ancestors and the elders in their respective position take care to lay down rules in the form of laws, taboos, to ensure prosperity of the society. And when the descendants remain faithful to their inheritance and thus made the experience of their ancestors their own, they remained in the living communion both with the ancestors and their own living king, continually reliving history of their people and proclaiming the marvels that their God have performed for them. It is believed in African worldview that a good deed increases the health of the community and helps build up the mystical body, and evil deeds towards destruction of the community. And just to highlight some few things here. So the African cosmology, it's in a sense, there is this hierarchy, God and the ancestors and community. And God and the ancestors and the elders are very key. Hence, the issue of respecting the elders is so emphasized in Africa, because elderly people are the wise ones, are the ones with knowledge that can enrich not only the young ones, but the community in totality. So and also the relationship between one and the entire community is quite crucial. So there is this sense of community, of having this relationship of Ubuntu with others, with God, and with our ancestors. And Ekwomode says the idea of community is conceptual foundation on which most African ideas, beliefs, values, ontology, cosmology, and ways of life are grounded. And I think this is one key aspect. That's why the issue of when there's a funeral and there were lots of people, you would hear African people say, you know, mamang obolokegi, you know, loyang mwabo, because there was this community, and it would always be like that. Hence, in African context, an issue of invitation, RSVP, these are not our things, because it is a communal, we are a communal community that always supports each other. And having mentioned this understanding, this African cosmology, I want to also continue to talk about bereavement rituals, which are very important to African people, and rituals in general. The word ritual refers to a symbolic action which focuses a certain kind of power through the use of natural signs and symbols. The rituals ranges for single gestures such as bowing and shaking of hands and so forth and so forth. So in African religion or understanding, or for African people, rituals are very important. And there are a number of them which we can refer to, and that we can refer to. According to the African worldview, death stands between the world of human beings and the world of the spirits, between the visible and the invisible. And a funeral is amongst the rituals that I was referring to. And just to mention a bit, that when a child is born, there is this ritual, or imbeleo. I think the Xhosa and the Zulus would call it that, as a way of introducing this child into the Tati Mukutso family, to be made one with that particular family that the child is born into. Rituals are also quite important because they demonstrate, or we understand them to symbolize taking a process of changing from a particular stage of life to the other. Like boys who go to the mountains, that is a ritual that symbolizes or signifies that this is a boy who has become a man. This is a single woman, Intombi, Moroetsana, who has been married, and there are rituals that are performed to signify or symbolizes this new state in which this person has taken from moving from being Intombi to Umham. So rituals are symbolic. They are routine, repetitive activities and actions through which we make connection with what we consider to be the most valuable dimension of life. And just to refer to the Zulu culture, there is this ritual that when a young woman has come to age, they would do a ceremony. I don't recall the name, but they would do this ceremony to appreciate and to also symbolize a new, that this young woman has grown from being a child to being a young woman. The same applies to death.
Yeah, I think umemolo, ne?
Umemolo, yes, definitely.
Yes.
Now, for Africans, the ritual actions enable us to maintain continuity with significant persons and events from the past. Rituals help us individually and communally to make sense of life's transition, providing some structure to ease movement from the familiar to the unknown. Properly construed rituals are an expression of people's thoughts, emotions, social organizations, and cultural identity. And this is the point where I was trying to get at. Hence, I started to look at African cosmology, because African cosmology captures who and what Africans think about themselves and how they value life and how they understand life. So rituals are an expression of people's thoughts, emotions, social organizations, and cultural identity. That's why in a context where circumcision is a norm, if you are not circumcised in such a community, social organization, you are not normal, because a norm is there is this ritual that has to be made, and this is a ritual that is recognized and embraced in that particular community. So social organization, also rituals plays a role in that. And identity, cultural identity, that I have gone to the mountains, I am a man, that gives that identity to that young woman whom the family has done umemulo for, or for that young man who has gone to the mountains, and other rituals that we can refer to. So I looked into at African cosmology. I looked at African bereavement rituals, and there is also a psychological factor into this whole conversation. And psychologists speak about attachment theory. Attachment theory says all human beings develop this attachment, this thing. You become attached to something. And this is a study which was done by John Bowlby, a study that tried to understand the connections of human beings. And also in African communities, where community is emphasized, it should be noted that there is that attachment that develops. An attachment not only with my siblings, not only with my own parents, but an attachment with my cousins, my aunts, my uncles, and so forth. To an extent that in some communities, some people are raised by their aunts and so, because we are one. There is this community that we belong into. And throughout that process, there is this attachment that is developed. And that is a normal process that happens when people relate to each other. And psychologists go further to say, this is not only something that happens between human beings, but it is something that happens between human beings, and you can be attached to your job, prestige, home, land, other possessions, and so forth. I think all of us, we can tell a story of an uncle who had an old car or an old jacket that they didn't want to let go of. Everywhere you see them, there is this old, and it doesn't matter what new thing that you would buy them, but they would always be attached to a particular thing. So that is how powerful this attachment is, not only to human beings, but to other things as well. And what is also mentioned is attachment continues across the lifespan of humans. Attachment behavior refers to any form of behavior that results in a person achieving or maintaining a desired proximity to an identified individual whom the person sees as a better able to cope with the world. So attachments come with a person's need for protection, help, soothing, and so forth and so on. So it's not something that happens between a mother and a child, but it happens even amongst adults as well. Like the way Reverend Tati is so attached to me. Now, having mentioned all these things and looking at the topic that we are looking at, why are Black African funerals so expensive? Why? The first thought that I have, and having looked at the data that I have shared with you now, is Black African funerals are not only they are not extravagant, but cultural, whether participants know it or not. There is culture that drives this excessive expense because, for example, if utata was a car, we must slaughter a cow because a car. We can't have snacks. It can't be. And what informs that is culture. That is, we feel, and it goes back to rituals. When it comes to bereavement rituals, there is this sense of this understanding that for this transition, for this person to trying to go to this world of the ancestors, we need to do things respectfully and properly. And that is one of the things that perpetuate this expense. Secondly, it is also a theological matter. A theological matter in a sense that we are Black and we are Christians. And we believe what the Apostle Creed teaches. We believe in life everlasting. But when death comes, often the African perspective overpowers the Christian faith we have. Now, all of a sudden, we need to slaughter a cow. We need to make sure that umama ugqoke, the dress that she likes, there is a blanket that we would buy to cover a casket and so forth, because as funu mama or utata akuto. So there is that sense, there is that theological issue that comes into play, that the African understanding that for this transition to take place, because if things are not done correctly, the family may have bad luck. The family may be punished for not sending off their loved ones properly. And properly means many things. It means the food, it means the casket, it means the rituals that are going to be performed in that particular funeral. So these are two first things that comes through. Secondly, rituals offer some psychological benefit to the bereaved. There is some psychology with rituals. For example, the rituals we do is just some symbolic acts that are done on our body parts or on us, but they carry so much meaning and they change so many things to us. For example, after I paid lobola for my wife, I had this sense of peace that, hey, I'm married. There is this thing there is this psychological gain that one finds. And I sense, my sense is it also has to do with the excessive use of money when we come. It is a way of coping. It is a way of trying to find closure, a way of trying to do good, the last good for this loved one that we are burying. Third point, until ATR and Christianity are understood to be two different religions by Africans, this problem will persist. Until ATR, or African traditional religion, and Christianity are understood to be two different religions by Africans, this problem will persist. Because I think if Africans believed only what Christianity teaches them, I don't think it would be an issue to just have snacks at my funeral. I don't think it would be an issue to have a 30-minute service. I don't think it would be an issue if my relatives are there, because, by the way, I'm born again, I've gone to heaven, so people should rejoice. That's what Christianity teaches. And until the two religions are understood to be two different religions, then the problem will be seen. The fifth point, it should be noted that the insurance companies as well have noted this gap, the value that African people put into death. And what is said is these insurance companies are targeting poor African communities. And just to elaborate further here, I remember I met Umfundisi Tati whilst we were serving together in Limpopo province. And I remember one of the things that used to frustrate me about people selling hope was the issue of giving. And sorry, but I'm just making an example here. Was the issue of giving. Because people would say to me, Muruti arna chali. And while after adjusting to the community and getting to understand the culture, I've learned that people Banema, they have man. Because in Limpopo, especially in rural areas, they don't have policies like us in towns and townships. They have funeral schemes, family funeral schemes. And you would find Kuku who ends then having 5 of these funeral schemes.
What do you drink?
Talekasi, grocery.
What do you drink?
The drinking, tente, and whatnot. 5 of them. And when I learned that, it pained me that our Black African people invest so much in death than in life. Because African people don't want a mistake when it comes to a funeral. And I remember telling them, Uguti, it's a shame that you've never been in a plane. You've never gone to Durban or Cape Town. Not because you cannot afford it, but because your investments, the investments that could enable you to do so, are invested in death. The 6th point I've mentioned as well, the respect that we put in death also contribute to this. And culture. In African society, social values are not separated from religious, political, and moral values. Into zomoya and into zenyama are one thing. If when I leave my office now, because I'm in the office as we speak, when I leave my office now and I trip, as an African, I tripped, it was a mistake because we said so. But secondly, Faneleng Chair Umfundisi Tati invites me to this Bible study, okay? And afterwards I think Wednesday I must check it. There's a spiritual math again. So that is the thing. And the most important thing at any ceremony is the amount of food you prepare. One ought not disappoint the guests or staff them. And you would hear the saying such as, I'm not sure how to translate it. Don't worry too much. It's just for, hey, I don't know how to translate this in English or other languages. But and the eruption of this culture concludes that the success of a funeral is determined by the casket and the food provided. And so to keep up with this, large amounts of food are prepared. In African culture, again, there is no such thing as a guest list. Oh boy, there is no guest list. There is no guest list. In a wedding, in a funeral, everyone is invited. So unless COVID, but then it's also a bit of a challenge because people may not come to the funeral service, but would come afterwards and even the days to come, just to come and check with the family, how was the funeral, how did everything go. So funerals of Black people are attended by everyone in the community. And this also comes from home, that women are taught that a way to a man's heart is through the stomach. So this thing of counting how many people have come, I say it. So for us, Bijo, Pichilo, Yamen.
Yeah.
So I've also noticed some few things with the context where you are in from this, that Zulu people have multiple ceremonies for the funerals. They believe that the spirits of the dead will wander, and not only Zulus, but all African people. This is the core thing, that if things are not done properly, and it goes back to psychology that I mentioned. You know, can imagine how I love my mother, how I love my siblings, how I love my wife. I would go all out to please myself, to make sure that my wife rests in peace. And if it means I should buy a cow, I would do so irrespective of how that bends my finances. So the importance of burial rites within Zulu traditional society can never be overemphasized. The outbreak of the coronavirus gravely disrupted these customs. And I will forward these articles that I'm referring to Mfundisi to share with us.
Okay. Thank you.
Going forward, the first recognition, there are two recommendations that I come with. And I don't have one answer to this. I'm just sharing my thoughts and thinking around this. The first recommendation is that African traditional religion is a reality in most African people's life, whether we want it or not as a church. It's a reality. The main line of former missionary churches generally tend to ignore this reality, thus creating a confusion among their members because of a lack of point of reference from the church. Sikh states that Christianity is not bound to the original culture. Let me, I want to get to this point that the role of the church is to teach and guide its members. Therefore, careful attention is needed to provide a helpful and theologically sound guidance for members. The church can no longer ignore the reality of the need to be enculturated. And this is a problem with our mainline churches. The issue, I'm not sure in other churches, but in my church, it's not often where you would hear us have a conversation about is the sin. I even had a struggle, and that's why in my area of specialization is African traditional religion, because I had a lot of challenges that if, like when I was in Limpopo, for example, I used to fight with my congregants because during the procession, when we leave the church to the graveyard, those burial rites, they would coming and walking in front of you, hey, Harimana, and I would say, no. We are observing the Methodist burial rites now. We are not observing culture. And at some point, I realized I was wrong because I had not, as a minister, given myself time to understand the impact and the importance of Ugu for residing the family. I did not, as a minister, give myself to do that. I looked at our liturgy. Our liturgy is English. It does not give space to that. At college, at seminary, I was not trained to interpret and understand and even guide. And I came to a point of asking myself, how dare I look down upon a culture that is mine and that I had not given myself enough time to study and understand. Secondly, dialogue. Not everything cultural is okay. There are some things that are in conflict with our Christian faith. But this is the second recommendation. Serious dialogue is needed in Africanization. And Panika argues that religious dialogue, and listen to this, means there must be an exchange of views and insights employed. There must be an exchange of views. And what we normally do as a Christian church, we point fingers, we vilify, we look down upon our culture, just like the missionaries of who started these churches are doing. We don't give ourselves time to understand what is this thing? What does it mean? Is it helpful to employ it in our liturgy or in our way of doing things so that we can best minister to our people or not? Members of the former missionary or mainland churches need to be guided and taught, and the church also needs to gradually embrace the good in the African knowledge system. It is not possible that everything African is bad. And it is said that that is the understanding. I normally make an example that you would hear people say, "Na gishumisi car." Sorry, bafundisi bami. Agishumisi car na gidirat. But the person is drinking green tea from China. Green tea, those are herbs. And it is sad because we had to be told by COVID that umhlonyan is good. It is sad that we had to wait for HIV and AIDS to value circumcision that our forefathers were doing. So these things are teaching us that Africans are not stupid, and there is something of value that we can find and embrace as African people and as a church as well. They are ignoring the presence of the African indigenous knowledge system, and this is invariably more detrimental than helpful. Not only detrimental to itself, but its members as well. According to the study, there is this secrecy as well that develops, and that is not helpful. For this, that is the end of my slides and my thoughts. I'm not sure if I've brought confusion or anything, but that is my contribution to this conversation.